Conservatives love going after AOC. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a prime target of theirs, and her appearance at Trump's State of the Union was no exception. In fact, Peggy Noonan, who is an op-ed writer for the Wall Street Journal, and who also happened to serve as a special assistant to Ronald Reagan, had some pretty strong feelings about the way AOC was behaving during the State of the Union. She writes, and good-natured with the white jackets, who I see some on Twitter are calling the straight jackets, okay? AOC had a rare bad night, looking not inspired, warm and original as usual, but sullen, teenaged, and at a loss.
So, not spirited, by the way. And so, first of all, when you say, I see some people on Twitter saying, that translation of that is, I would like to say, because I think it's funny, but I don't want to get in trouble, so I'll ascribe it to other people. And Peggy Noonan's a conservative, so she's like, oh, those women in white jackets, straight jackets, they're crazy for being Democrats. All right, we got it, that's very classy. And look, I don't mind taking pot shots, I do it all the time, but be honest about who you are. And then, so, does Ocasio-Cortez have to look spirited at all times? And I thought being spirited was kind of a young thing, but now you're saying she's young for not being spirited and that it's some sort of teenager thing. So they have found every imaginable and non-imaginable ways to criticize her.
So when she's enthusiastic, she's young and inexperienced, but when she's serious, she's sullen and teenage. So no matter what, she's young and they hate her for it.
Yes.
Yeah, and also I don't enjoy ever being told by anyone, man or woman, to smile, right? So how about I get to have whatever facial expression I want to have at any given moment, whether it's a resting bitch face, or it's a look of enthusiasm, or just, a look of complete and utter disgust, which is the look I would have on my face if I were sitting there listening to this nonsense State of the Union address where the person who has divided the country more than any other president in US history is calling for unity, right? Yeah, well, so I would have a similar look on my face. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as always, will respond to the critics and do so in a swift and effective way, and I'll give you an example. So she says, why should I be spirited and warm for this embarrassment of a State of the Union? Tonight was an unsettling night for our country. The president failed to offer any plan, any vision at all for our future. We're flying without a pilot, and I'm not here to comfort anyone about that fact.
Oh, I love that last line. God,
I love salt and I love sass. And I especially love when it's used in the right context.
Yeah, no, she comes with a heavy bag of sea salt.
Well, this Wall Street Journal reporter, it's a irksome thing that the mainstream media tends to do. A lot of these publications, they have strict standards about what they can and cannot say, and they cannot appear partisan. But it's partisan implicitly, like you can read it in the framing of how she's talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We know what your political stances are, so it's frustrating that they pretend to be neutral and like these arbiters of truth, but in reality, in the way that they frame things, it's super obvious how they feel.
So now, to be fair to Peggy Noonan, she's a columnist, right? And so she gets to have more opinion, but she's still doing that veneer of like, oh no, it's not that I disagree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's just that there's a certain etiquette that you're supposed to have in Washington. To me, those are my favorite. The etiquette cops. You have to be civil, and you have to be civil in a certain way, and you have to, even if you don't like the president, you have to be warm and spirited.
No, okay. There's a very specific group of politicians or people in the political world who don't ever get to talk about etiquette, decorum, or any of that. It's the Republicans, right? So as long as you're supportive of who's the president at this moment, right? As long as you're supportive of Trump, you don't get to talk about the rhetoric, the decorum, the etiquette of anyone else. You don't get to critique it, right? Because you can't just let the president say the things that he says and do the things that he does without any critique, and then go off and talk about, oh, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't smiling enough during the State of the Union address. No, you have no leg to stand on.
And it's a
over.
Sexist comment. I mean, I know she's a woman, but when, I think you were hinting at this, Anna, when people tell you to smile, it's usually men who are, I don't know, are passing you on the street. Trump supporters would say that to me when I'd interview them sometimes, which was a fun anecdote. But yeah, it really is men oftentimes who feel like they can tell you how to feel, how to look. They want you to appear more pleasing.
Yeah, so and there is an uneven playing field, as we often point out on the show, where Trump can be the most surly, vicious guy there is on the planet and tell you that women are bleeding from wherever and attack them in unspeakable ways. But when you're at the State of the Union, you must be warm and spirited towards him.
No.
No, why do I have that obligation? I don't. And Republicans can consistently attack Democrats. Joe Wilson yelling out, "You lie," to Obama, and Ted Cruz saying that we're going to be stuffed into Hobbit homes. Louis Gohmert saying Obama is going to reconstitute the Ottoman Empire. Whatever madness, insanity that they have, they can come up with insane conspiracy theories about how Democrats have organized 99% of the scientists in the world to all lie at once about climate change. I mean, they can. There are no rules for Republicans, no rules at all. But Democrats, you are constrained to incredibly specific rules, including your facial expressions, right? So no deal, no deal. And that is at the heart of this. It might seem like a fun little story, but there is a core here where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez refuses to play by Washington's rules, and it's driving them crazy.
I love it.
From major issues to minor issues like this.
I love it. I love it. So she also gave a response to Trump's State of the Union address and did so on MSNBC. Rachel Maddow invited her on. So I want to play her comments and then we'll comment on that.
The president was unprepared. I don't think that he did his homework. We've seen States of the Union addresses delivered by many presidents, Democrat and Republican. They almost always have substantive policies that are offered. I agree with Senator Klobuchar there that there was no plan. There was no plan to address our opioid crisis. There was no plan to address the cost of health care. There was no plan to increase wages. It was, I had to ask myself, is this a campaign stop or is this a State of the Union?
That's a great point. Even if you agree with Trump, and some conservatives are also saying this, like, hey, we like what Trump is saying, but what's the battle plan? What are we doing? Because usually in the State of the Union, if you're unfamiliar with these, they lay out what their agenda is for the upcoming year. So, and they say, okay, now I think that immigration is a problem, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Now that's a rare situation where he has one go-to move, but it's at least a policy. I'm going to build a wall. Now he didn't care about it the first 2 years. All of a sudden he thinks it's a national emergency, but at least it has like some fix to it. Opioid, bad. What are you going to do about it? Well, if you cared about the opioid problem, you might talk about the pharmaceutical industry and the pill mills and et cetera. No, if you could discern an answer, it was wall. Everything is wall. But are you going to put forward any legislation? And obviously Congress does that, but the president usually backs a piece of legislation or champions a piece of legislation, et cetera. There's no substance at all. And that's a critique not based on whether you agree or disagree with him. So Ocasio-Cortez clearly right there again.
Yeah, and she's not the only one who's criticized him for lack of clarity, lack of policies. There are people on the right who have done so as well, including Rick Santorum, a huge supporter of Donald Trump's. So this is not coming from a partisan perspective. This is coming from an actual objective perspective. And he also lost his place in his speech on the prompter several times, which a bunch of people have caught.
Well, it seemed like an obvious attempt to humanize him in ways. So he talked about kids with cancer, he talked about cancer treatments, he talked about HIV/AIDS treatment, addressing topics that everyone can agree on and that every president, Obama too, cared about these topics, but they were just really sideshows to his actual policy proposals because maybe there's some internal polling that says that the American people think he's cruel, which is the reality.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the policy that he wants to champion the most is not a popular policy. Building the wall does not have the majority of voters supporting him. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe that's why the speechwriters pivoted toward the anecdotal stuff, the heartwarming stories. And by the way, conservatives hated that as well, probably because they're heartwarming stories. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair.
No, not you don't know. Of course, that's why they hated them, right? They're like, oh, stories about heroic Jews. Yeah, okay. Tell me when the Trump State of the Union is on. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.